So it is with pleasure that I introduce my colleague here at Northumbria University, Vicki Elsey, Dr. Vicki Elsey, who is an academic but also an HCPC registered occupational psychologist. So importantly, Vicki had many years working in practice, doing OCPSY consultancy, and has now made an academic career on research that's also highly applicable to OCPSY practice in the area of careers, around things such as job crafting and how people come to like their jobs and their careers, employability and so on. So I will let her come and speak.
Thanks, Alison, and thank you everyone for attending my talk this afternoon. I'm wishing I hadn't gone last, because I'm kind of thinking, what have I got to add to such great speakers from today? What I'm hoping it will do is kind of consolidate some of the things that other speakers have said, some of the things that I'm saying really echo what they're saying, and actually we haven't talked in advance, so it's not like we've planned this is by accident. Because I'm interested in occupational psychology and people's careers, I'm interested in you guys. So just by show of hands, and I promise I won't pick on anybody, how many of you know what you want to do for a career? Just show of hands. Okay. Great. How many of you feel prepared for a career? Fantastic. I'm talking to you guys later on. Okay. How many of you heard of occupational psychology? Fantastic. Probably the most people who've ever put a hand up in any of my lectures ever. Amazing. And how many of you are interested in occupational psychology as a career? Great. Okay. Fantastic. So even if you're not interested in occupational psychology as a career, I'm hoping that there's some things that you'll learn about careers from my session. I've split it into 3 parts. The first part is a bit of a summary of me and the things that I've done. The second part is a little bit of theory, not too much, but just to kind of try and make sense of career. And then the final part will be about you. So I want you to do some thinking in that final part. So just to start with me, as Alison said, I'm an academic at Northumbria University. Although I very rarely call myself an academic, it just kind of doesn't feel right. And I think it's probably down to imposter syndrome that I know that Jemima was talking about earlier. But I wasn't trained for a career in academia. I was trained for a career in practice. And I've kind of happened to stumble into an academic career. Having said that, I've worked for 6 years in practice. And I've been at the university for 12 years, so I think at some point I should probably call myself an academic, but I'm not sure when that will be. So my journey. How many of you have felt like this? How many of you have been me in the bottom? Yeah. Maybe some of you are feeling it now. You know, oh no, I need to get a career, I don't know what I want to do, what's going to happen next? Maybe your exams are looming. There's been some real significant moments in my career when I felt like this. So I remember A-level results day being one of them and thinking, well, I've wasted 2 years of my life, so now what am I going to do? I remember doing my degree feeling a little bit like this. I was the only person in my family to ever have done a degree before, so there was no sort of frame of reference for me. I didn't know that I could pick on someone else's experience that I knew really well and learn from it. I was the first one in my family to do it. I think also I felt like this when I decided later in my career to do a professional doctorate in occupational psychology. Still to this day, I'm not sure why I decided to do that after I just had a child and was working nearly full time, but you know, these things happen. I think coming back to work after maternity leave was another moment that I felt like this. And I'd probably say that every day for the past fortnight, when I realised I hadn't prepared my session for today, I felt like this as well. So I think it's probably fair to say that you'll all have moments like this, and they are normal. They don't feel normal at the time, they feel awful. But you'll get through them. Now, I still think of myself as quite young, but actually, when I came to do the research for this, I realised that my frame of reference is probably very different to yours. The cultural references that I'm using, these are from the late 90s, which was when I was a student. These are the things that I used to watch, a lot of American TV. And this was really about women having careers, having really failing personal lives, with fantastic jobs, social lives after work, going to the bar, and I thought, I want some of that. I'm going to work in this city, I'm going to be a managing director by the time I'm 30, it's going to be amazing. And actually, my career has been amazing, but it hasn't been anything like this. And I'm really interested in, I guess, what your careers are going to look like based on the TV programmes that you watch. So for me, it was about this. What's a TV programme in Harry Potter going to lead to? I mean, who knows? Game of Thrones, what's that going to be? What kind of career paths will that lead to? In 20 years' time, I guess we'll find out. So this was my early career, quite linear. I graduated from my undergraduate degree in 2000. I was that student who didn't speak up in class. I lacked confidence. I was very shy. I didn't want to present, and I knew that I didn't want a job that would mean that I had to do presentations. I'm not sure how I became an academic. But these things happen. I had a little bit of work experience, so I'd worked in a factory, packing barber bags for a living, cutting thread ends off bags for a long time. Some factory work doing that, office work, and also a lot of bar work throughout my degree, so that kind of supported my undergraduate degree. And I knew I didn't want to be a clinical psychologist. That was what everybody talked about, but I knew that that wouldn't be for me. I felt that the emotional load would be too much for me to handle. And I knew that I'd seen my family hate their jobs and really dislike what they were doing, and I thought there's got to be more to life than this. People can't hate going to work every day. It's got to be better than that. I didn't really know what occupational psychology was, but at the university I was studying at started a master's degree in the year that I was graduating. So I thought, I'll do that. It's about jobs. I'm interested in jobs. I don't want to be a clinical psychologist. This seems like another option. And one of the options for me was also teaching. I didn't really like kids. Didn't think that was going to be the best decision. So I did the master's, and I was quite driven at the time. So although I was shy and lacked confidence and quiet, I knew that I wanted to be successful, and I knew that to be successful I would have to work hard. I found an organisation that were a consultancy, and they were actually based in the northeast. And I just begged them for some experience and begged and begged and begged, please can I do my thesis with you? And the way that the master's worked was the thesis is a third of the degree, and so that happened over the summer. Eventually they said, okay, we've got some data, you can analyse that. And that's what I did. I did my thesis for them. It was on assessment centres, so looking at what made an assessment centre reliable and valid. And I loved statistics, although I hate it now, loved it then. Very different to most people. So graduated from my master's, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but there were some things that I wasn't prepared to let go of. So I lived in the northeast, and my partner at the time, who's now my husband, not that we've split up, we are still together, had 2 kids, and we couldn't really leave the northeast. So it was kind of about how do I make a career for myself in the northeast of England where there aren't that many job opportunities. So I just got a job in a recruitment consultancy working in admin, and probably, like Fraser, every day would send random emails to organisations saying, please can I have some experience? I'll just come and watch. I'll just come and see what you do. And I blame my university lecturer because she said something like 70% of jobs aren't actually advertised. So that's what I did. I just kept pestering. And eventually the organisation that I did my thesis with gave up and said, look, just come and do a week's worth of work experience with us. We'll pay for you to come to London. You can shadow the assessment centres and see what you think. So I thought it was a great idea. My partner thought it was a terrible idea because I had to quit a job to do that. And we had a mortgage. Luckily, he worked and it was enough to pay the mortgage. So I just quit the job and off I went to London thinking this is going to be my life from now on. And this was, as my dad called it, my first proper job. And I remember him saying things like, when you get a proper job, you'll realise how easy you had it as a student. You know, I'm sure you've all heard that. It's dead easy being a student, isn't it? But luckily, my dad had never been to university, so he had no idea what it was really like being a student. So this was a northeast-based management consultancy. And I had 4 distinct roles in that organisation. The first one was a business support role where I just learned about working in business. And that really meant things like Excel, Word, PowerPoint presentations, answering the phone when clients rang up, taking notes in meetings. It was really a kind of apprenticeship in business, things that I hadn't really experienced before. Then I decided that I didn't like that anymore, and I wanted to do more research work, and they didn't have a research consultant, so I sort of created this role for myself where I would use my research experience and use best practice to design interventions. Then they gave me a role about a year later as an occupational psychology consultant, and all the time I was working towards becoming a chartered occupational psychologist. And that's the thing that I really like about the occupational psychology route, is that it's work-based. So you're not a student, you are actually at work, gathering experience and writing up your experience for a logbook. The consultancy that I worked in happened to be doing all of these things, and these things are the 5 core areas of occupational psychology. So within learning, training and development, we would run training courses for organisations, leadership programs for leaders in organisations. I still do a little bit of this work now. Lots of work around well-being, organisational change, how you can help individuals to prepare for organisational change. But the bulk of our work was probably in psychological assessment at work. And I would do a lot of testing for graduate schemes, so sifting individuals into organisations for graduate schemes, accelerated development programs where I would design interview processes and assessment centres. And I absolutely loved the work. I learned a lot about how business works. A lot of it was back to basics, so it was back to the kind of literature reviews, using statistics, using qualitative methods, and applying those to business, so it felt really comfortable for me. It was a small organisation, so I got to try lots of different things. And with hindsight, I think that was a really good decision to go with a small company where you were kind of somebody who mattered within that organisation. And it meant that I could get lots of experience because we all worked really well together as a team. And one of the things that I learned was that it's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. So, reminder, this is my early career. We're up to 2001. I've got my dream job and I'm on track to become managing director by the time I'm 30. But then things got a little messy and I was kind of severely limited by my technical ability. This is the best I could do, I'm afraid. But I will explain it all to you. So, I got sick of travelling. I got sick of living out of a suitcase. I think there was 1 week that I was in Birmingham, London, Leeds, and Wick in the far north of Scotland. And I just thought, this just isn't sustainable. I don't like the travel. It's not glamorous like I thought it would be. My partner at the time, who's now my husband, remember, he was working away and then stopped working away, so I really missed him when I was travelling, and a lot of it involved travelling on a Sunday and coming home on a Friday night, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. So a job came up at the university, and the programme leader of the course at the time who taught me said, "Why don't you apply?" And honestly, I had no idea what being an academic meant. No idea at all. Still struggling 12 years later to figure that one out. Don't tell my colleagues at the front of the room. And I just thought, well, why not? I'll give it a shot. It means that I can be at home. I had no desire to be an academic. I wasn't thinking I'm going to become this wonderful academic, tell everybody my thoughts and ideas, write journal articles. I just wanted to be at home is essentially why I made that decision. And it has turned out to be a really good decision because I get to do a lot of the things that I enjoy. I get to craft my role. I have a lot of autonomy, a lot of flexibility. And I can still be an occupational psychologist within that role. So my first job was the programme leader for the master's course in occupational psychology. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to make it less theoretical and more applied, because I felt that I didn't have those applied skills when I graduated. And it was the things that I was lacking from the course. It was the things that I really had to get an apprenticeship in the business for. So we have a lot more of an applied programme at Northumbria now. So within that time, I also got married, then started a professional doctorate, then had a child, then was awarded my doctorate and had another child same year. There's a coincidence there somewhere, but it's quite personal. I'll not tell you the full story. And I also worked part-time, so when I came back after having my son, I did a lot of part-time work, and that was quite a challenge to work in an academic environment, part-time, also be doing a doctorate and have a child who wasn't at school. And looking back, I don't actually know how I'm still standing here today, really, because it was just ridiculous. And I also thought, why not volunteer with the BPS in that time? So I was co-chair of the Division of Occupational Psychology Training Committee, where we accredited master's programmes throughout the UK. And currently I'm on the Stage 2 qualification board. I'm the academic board member, bizarrely. So my role is to help with the new qualification that's been brought in March next year. So that's where we are today. Now, I think my career in academia has been kind of practitioner becoming an academic, so learning what it means to be an academic. And also I've had to adapt and change and do things differently. So what I'd anticipated isn't actually what I'm doing. I love working with the next generation of occupational psychologists and helping them to think through what's going to be their career, what's going to be their future. And because of that, my doctorate was actually on the career of an occupational psychology graduate. So I looked at employment, identity, and employability. And even though I've been in academia for 12 years, because I only graduated in 2016, I'm now classed as an early career researcher, which is really nice. So I get to say I don't know anything about research now, I'm still learning. And I feel like now I'm doing what I originally wanted to do 20 years ago, which was to make a difference to the working lives of individuals. So the projects that I'm currently working on, I'm working with my colleague Laura, who's sitting at the front, and some wellbeing work within the police force. I also got interested in the motherhood penalty, which I think is probably because I've got kids. So realising that when you have children, your career trajectory kind of drops off a little bit. Why is that? What's the factors that cause that to happen? But for me as an applied psychologist, what can we do about it? How can we help women to have successful careers? I'm also working with a hospice to develop a values-based recruitment tool. And I've got a little bit of interest in employee silence, but again, I've fallen into this, so why individuals remain silent when they're observing critical issues at work. But also, I still work in practice. I've recently completed a tender for an approach to support leaders in the health service. So looking at how we can develop them, coach them. Hopefully we'll be successful and we'll get to do some of that work in the future. As a team in the occupational psychology group, we've done some assessment centres for heads of service with a local housing organisation. I also coach graduates, and I used to do that when I first graduated. I would come back to the master's programme and coach graduates. So we do a lot of one-to-one work helping individuals to develop in the organisation. I currently supervise trainee occupational psychologists and still volunteer with the BPS. So remember, this is what I thought my career was going to be. But that's not what it's been. It's probably been a little bit more like this, a bit more about compromise, adaptability, picking different routes, not always having all of the options available to me because I wanted to stay in the Northeast. But essentially what I've learned is that I really love my profession. I call myself an occupational psychologist because I love what I do. I don't call myself any other title. I don't call myself an academic. I don't call myself a lecturer. I'm an occupational psychologist. That's my profession and that's my identity. I just happen to work in an academic environment. So I think you've seen something similar to this today. Damn it. So I'd planned this kind of linear en route to become a managing director by the time I was 30. But the reality was very different to that. And I think that that's the common message that's come through today, is that preparing yourself for some things that you might be interested in is great, but also be open to things that you maybe hadn't thought were going to be open to you or maybe wouldn't happen to you. And it's that adaptability that's really important in careers. So I think from early career, for me, it was about just finding a job. And you might be in that same position. You just want to find something that's interesting that you want to do. And do that, make the most of it, get some experience. And remember that it doesn't have to be a set of tasks that are on a job description. You can shape things, you can ask for more responsibility, you can ask to reduce some demands. I think more recently, for me, it's about managing competing priorities, maintaining a sort of work identity while also being a wife and mother and having competing things that are going on. But remembering that I love my subject and going back to my initial interests. So that's me. And as an occupational psychologist, obviously I'm interested in theory, the theory of careers. So I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about what a career actually is. It's one of those terms that people use all the time. We all think we know what it is, but actually it's probably very different for every individual. And this is my favourite definition, the evolving sequence of a person's work experiences over time. It talks about something changing, something adapting. It talks about work experiences. It's not just about a job or a role. And it's something that happens over time. So your career might be something that you kind of look back over and think, oh, that's what my career looked like. It's not necessarily something that you can be planful for. Now, in terms of that definition, the things that I think are important are around education. So this is the qualifications that you get. You'll all be getting them. You'll all have some. What are they? Why did you take them? What led to that point? But then what did you learn from those qualifications? What did you learn about your subject? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about what you want to do next? And what did you learn about career? Also, what sort of things have you participated in? So what jobs have you done? What life experiences do you have? What sports have you been involved in? What volunteering have you done? Because all of these things create you as an individual, and you are different to everybody else in the room. But think then also about what's important to you, what matters to you, what are your values and ambitions, because that will help you to shape the career, to drive it in the way that you want it to go. So some important theories that can help to explain that, because there's always a theory, isn't there, behind all of these things. Career construction theory is probably the most well-liked theory in occupational psychology around careers. It's the most closely related to the reality of career. And this is really about self-identity, and it's about the identity that you have, and that therefore the decisions that you make are based upon that identity. There's no such thing as luck, because you put yourself into certain positions because of who you are. In order to do this, you need to be adaptable, and adaptability consists of the 4 C's. So concern, this is about having an interest in your career. You're all here today, so you're all doing all right on that one. You're interested in what it is that you're doing. Control, this is about taking responsibility for things, how you can take responsibility for the things that you do in your life that are leading towards your career. Curiosity is really about multiple pathways. So there are many different ways to get to the same end result. So curiosity is about exploring those opportunities. And confidence, which Fraser mentioned, is also really key. Do you have the belief in yourself that you can do these things? I've put up there a link to the Career Adaptability Questionnaire. So if any of you want to follow that link, I think these slides are going to be shared, so you can follow the link off the slides and complete that questionnaire yourself. Another decent theory in this context is happenstance, and this is something that career guidance counsellors often use. And this is really about indecision being a normal part of career, so it's okay to not be sure. And what a career counsellor can do is to help you think about the steps that you might take. What it isn't, and the thing that drives me insane, as my students all know, is fill out this questionnaire, and then we'll give you your results, and we'll tell you at the end of that you should be, I think I was told, librarian when I was at school. I don't really like reading, so it was never really going to be the best career option for me. But that's not what this is about. You know, career isn't about finding a fit or finding a job. It's about an understanding of you and enacting the role that you want to have within a workplace. And within employability, there are lots of interactions between these theories. And employability is multifaceted. This isn't about a job. Employability doesn't mean employment. It means being able to drive your career in the way you want to. So just some key findings from my research. Now, this was about occupational psychologists, but I think it relates to lots of smaller careers, and I think that many careers in psychology are probably classed as small because despite how many people study psychology degrees, not everyone goes on to become a psychologist. But I would argue that there are lots of people working as psychologists in business that you don't know are psychologists. You don't have to have the job title psychologist to be a psychologist. Sometimes it's about a mindset and it's about a professional identity. So in line with that, what I found was a lot of occupational psychology graduates were job crafting. So they might be working as a human resources advisor or a managing director or working in rehabilitation support. And they didn't have this job title of occupational psychologist, and there were other people doing the same job as them, but the way that they did it was congruent with their identity as an occupational psychologist. They would ask for responsibility, they would try and reduce demands or not do things that they felt weren't congruent. So think about how you can craft a role for your own professional identity. Also think about self-efficacy. So this is about confidence, and again, links to what Fraser was saying. This really does influence on your career success and your employability. And unfortunately, you're not born with it. You get it from experiences. And you have to put yourself into positions that feel uncomfortable because that's the only way you'll learn and that's the only way you'll become more confident. I couldn't have done this talk 20 years ago. It's probably taken me 20 years to get to this point of thinking, yeah, I could do a talk like that. So you've got to try things out and you've got to be prepared to fail because learning comes from failure too. Again, this links to Fraser's points about profile raising, but think about how you sell your profession, whether it's psychology, whether it's counselling, whether it's clinical, forensic, educational, health, sport and exercise, occupational. I think that's all of them. Use titles that are congruent with that identity. Tell people what it means to be a psychologist. Tell people what psychology is. We are really privileged to have this degree, this qualification, and we can make a huge difference, even if it's just with a psychology undergraduate degree, because the learning that you get is so different to someone who's studying, finance. What do they learn about human behaviour? Okay. And be proud to be a psychologist. The responsibility for promoting the profession rests with all of us. It doesn't rest with the BPS. It's something that we all do and we create our profession. And also destination data. So universities ask for this, the professional body asks for this. And this is really important that we understand what it is that individuals are doing with the qualifications that they have. And it's only through that we can start to really understand the profession and really understand the impact that individuals are having. So if you get asked to share that information, do share it. Okay, so that's some theory on career. Now let's try and think about you in your career. So why does it matter? Why do occupational psychologists care about this, and why should you care? So you've probably seen graphs like this before, but there are 24 hours in a day. Say we spend 8 of those hours at work, 8 of those hours asleep, and 8 doing some other things, some fun stuff. Work, 8 hours. You can do that when you've got 16 hours of other stuff that's more interesting, like sleep, can't you? Although, bad days at work really impact on the sleep, don't they? And some of your other time is spent thinking about work, travelling to work, travelling home. So work really has a huge impact. Think of it this way as well, that's 10 years of your life in each one of those blocks. The first 20 of being a child is fun, isn't it, for most people? And the last 20 when you're retired, everyone's working towards that retirement, which is moving later and later in life. But do you want to be the person who spends 60 years of your life waiting for the weekend, waiting for the day to be over, clock watching, trying to get through every day? Or do you want to be the person who enjoys every day at work? How can you get fun and joy out of work? If you're not happy, do something about it. Don't just sit there and be miserable. Don't think, I've done this qualification and I'm doing the job that I thought I wanted to do and actually I hate it. It's never too late, and I think that message has come across today, that it's never too late to change your career or to really think about whether you're on the right path. But also, there are little things that you can do every day at work to make work more enjoyable. And this is why I love being an occupational psychologist, because I get to work with people to help them enjoy this part of their life. Has a huge impact. So back to this about your career. What qualifications do you have? Why are they important to you? What learning have you experienced? What things have you done in the past? What are you currently doing now? And what are your future plans? What have you learned about yourself in career, about career generally, about your subject? What other things have you done? What have you participated in? You're not a kind of work self and a sporting self and a home self. You are one person who combines all of these things, and you get experiences in different ways. And also, what matters to you? What's important to you? I thought it was important to be a company director by the time I was 30, because career success was about progression and salary. That actually wasn't my dream, that was somebody else's. For me, it's about happiness, fulfillment, having time at home with my family. These are the things that matter to me. So what matters to you? And really think about that in the decisions that you're going to make about your career. So this is something I'd like to encourage everybody to do, and this is something that my students have done, something that people I work with have done, and it's drafting a career a timeline. So these are genuine timelines from individuals that I worked with at the NHS who were happy for me to share this. They're on the graduate scheme, and they were coming to the end of that scheme trying to decide what to do next. You'll see that each one's different. Some of these weren't the original versions. They had to be doctored because they just weren't fit for showing in a public forum. But write it down. Can you draw your career journey? Can you draw your past? What's next for you? What's your future going to look like? What do you want it to look like? Because having a picture of your career can really help to think about what matters to you. And finally, just some tips really from me. Make the most of the opportunities that you have. So your future career success is about more than understanding the knowledge areas that you're getting on your degree programme. It's about more than theory at university. It's about you, who you are, what you enjoy, what you'd like to get out of work. And remember that experience grows confidence. So try things, see what happens, say yes to stuff instead of no. Be prepared to adapt. So what you want now might not be where you end up. That's okay, because you're still learning about who you are. I'm still learning about who I am. I'm becoming an academic. 10 years' time, I might even call myself one. And also this thing about you, developing an understanding of you and who you are. What's your measure? And finally, just be interested, network, learn about individuals, learn about their jobs, ask people questions. Even if you're firm that I want to be a clinical psychologist, there's no harm in just seeing whether there are other jobs that are interesting as well. And be authentic, be you within all of this. And the you in this room is different to the person sitting next to you. Thank you.